So, just a couple announcements. If you have a raffle ticket still and you haven't put it in a prize, go ahead and take half of one and put it in a prize down on the first floor. You have to pick up your prizes before 5 o'clock, and they'll have the names of the winners beforehand, just down there. So, and that's all we have for announcements right now. So here's all of our sponsors. We wouldn't have this without them, so please thank them by checking out their projects and whatnot. Go ahead. Yeah, so there's like 4 boxes downstairs that have each description of what they might be, so you can put your raffle in each one. There's like an MSDN license. I'm not sure. Yep. So anyway, our sponsors, go ahead and check them all out. They all have awesome products that you guys can use to help make your life better, and be a little bit more sufficient in working and whatnot, and be able to learn. So. Personally, we have 2 sponsors for this talk. We have Pluralsight, and we also have Xamarin. So there is some swag if you guys want to grab some after the session. Just please single file, just grab something and go. So unless you want to talk. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get started about a couple minutes early. So this is cross-platform mobile development of C#. It's kind of a newer thing that's kind of came out through the use of Xamarin tools. If you're not familiar with what Xamarin tools are, we do have a whole another session called Intro to I think Gone Mobile with Stephen Shaw, and that's going to be 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock in room 110. So if you guys want to hit that up, there's going to be a lot more explanation on what Xamarin is as a kind of like a framework, and what you can use it for. I'm going to touch it a little bit, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. So about me, this is my email, my Twitter. I have a GitHub account with a few examples if you guys want to see some cool stuff, and also have a blog where I kind of just blog on anything about Xamarin. So I might do a blog post about list views or blog post about table collections or something. I'm also a Xamarin certified mobile developer, so yeah. Started a new user group in Ogden. It's called Ogden Mobile Developers. We're going to bring as many mobile developers, between Logan and in Salt Lake City if we can, to this group and kind of go over anything mobile. I mean, you're an iOS developer, go ahead and come. You're an Android developer, come. We're going to be doing a lot of examples in .NET, but you can easily transfer those to the specific platforms. We also have food provided. It's at WSU Davis campus at 7 o'clock of the first Tuesday of each month. There's a meetup link right there that you guys can go up and sign up for if you're interested, and it should be a lot of fun. So let's talk about market share. This is February 2013. These numbers are never right, but this is kind of what we can kind of base what we see. You can see that Android has majority of the share. You also have Apple with about 40%. And then you have BlackBerry and Microsoft kind of just a little bit in there. The reason I bring this up is just because we're seeing that we have all these platforms that we need to develop for. We have users in every single silo of, we have to make Android apps for them. We have to make iOS apps. We even have to make Windows apps for them. You have to pick all those platforms to hit your audience, and that's one of the biggest concerns with this, is being able to maintain one code base and share that across each platform and implement the native features that you want inside of it. Our source is ComScore, just a kind of analytic company. So we have native platform languages. So you're an iOS developer. You're an Objective-C, right? Android, you're going to be doing Java or C++, depends on what you want to do with it. And of course, Windows Phone, you're going to be doing C# or whatever you want to do with that. So we have 3 distinct languages here that we kind of have to we have to notice that they have the discrepancies of the languages. So we need to be able to use classes that we can actually share throughout the Java native interface, and also compiling ahead of time to obtain our results. So kind of just the platform differences. We know if you have an Android application, it might look the same. If you open up your Facebook application, it might look the same on Android, it might look the same on iOS, but are the code bases really the same? And the answer is no, in most cases. You're going to be having to implement all the native features of that phone through their SDK or their APIs. Okay, so that's kind of where the platform differences are. You'll see them, and you'll have to jump gaps just to make them happen. So there's a solution for part of this. Basically, using C# for everything. So the company Xamarin has a framework that basically lets you convert your C# code or your .NET runtime to the respective platforms. So with iOS, you're using ahead of time compiling. With Android, you're tying into the JNI, Java native interface, and then just you have your native, which is Windows Phone, right? So what's the power of C#, right? Well, we get the .NET framework. We get Link and P-Link, which is awesome. Wouldn't know where I'd be without it. Memory management is awesome, even though all the other languages do have their memory management. You also have the task parallel library, which is pretty sweet if you're familiar with .NET. You have the dynamic keyword, and you also have the async and await keywords. So being able to make easy web requests, get data back, kind of going through that flow. This just a picture of not Steve Ballmer's cat, just a lot of C# developers out there. So what tools can you use to actually make these applications? Well, you have Xamarin Studio, which is it's an IDE that's really similar to IntelliJ or IdeaJ, whatever you want to call it, and it's mainly for C#, and it was built from the MonoDevelop IDE, so it's kind of the commercialized IDE for that. And then you also have the Visual Studio plugin. You can use it in 2010 and above. However, if you want to do iOS development, you need to have a Mac build host. So you need to have some physical Mac device that you can send your code to use the iOS simulator. Or if you want to compile to your iPhone, you have to go through a Mac. So with Xamarin Studio, you have limitations. The PC version can only do Android stuff. Can't do Windows Phone. Can't do iOS stuff, which kind of sucks. But you can still open up all the code bases and write your code in there. You just can't compile to the phones. However, probably the best solution for a lot of people is just to download Xamarin Studio on the Mac. And that'll get you access to iOS and Android. And then if you choose to hit Windows Phone, you might need Visual Studio or something like that. I personally use Visual Studio, and I have a Mac Mini build machine. So I'm able to do Android, Windows, and push all my iOS code to my iOS simulator. So here's Xamarin's unique approach. Basically just kind of showing that we have one core library, and we're able to put in majority of our business logic, any services we need to access, any data repositories or anything like that, that we all have in one library, and then we're able to share it to each platform. And that's the cool thing about it. You write once, you share across all platforms. So as you can see, with like iPhone and Android and Windows, all you're implementing is just the native platform. You're implementing the user interface, and you're also implementing the app layer. So basically just being able to share that code is pretty unique and awesome. It's a lot different than PhoneGap and Titanium and Telerik's new suite that they have. Of course, they can all compile to the respective platforms, but it's the actual, can you get down to the hardware? Can you do all this stuff with it? So, and I've used PhoneGap in the past, what code can actually be shared? So we want to be able to use as much possible code sharing throughout each platform. So basically, like I said, you have core application logic. This would be your whole business layer if you want to. Entities and models. I mean, you're making POCO objects and being able to share one to call another web service or whatever. Web services you can share, which is pretty awesome. Make a REST API service where you're pulling pictures from Flickr or something like that, and being able to share that service on each platform. With SOAP, it gets a little bit more trickier. You have to actually, you have to just, like you would with old .NET 2.0 stuff, you make a web service reference, and then it makes a proxy object, and then you can go from there. So then you have data access and file access. You have limitations on these because each platform has their own file system. So you have to actually make an abstraction to hit each file system. So they might have a different path of where they might store their SQLite. Well, each platform does use SQLite, so you do kind of have that. You can share all your view models. So if you're kind of a Microsoft junkie like me, you're using MVVM pattern. You're able to share those view models that you wrote in Silverlight back in 2010 or whatever, and you're going to be able to strip down most of that code and use it across platforms, which could be a solution to what you're trying to do with your mobile campaign or whatever. And then also navigation. So each platform kind of has a different navigation pattern. You have iOS where you kind of just have a stack where you're just going up pages and whatnot. Android where you have activities and you're kind of just everywhere. And you also have Windows which you have kind of like pages and whatnot. So you do also have limitations there, but like I said, you can make an abstraction that does the exact same thing, but you have to implement it on each platform. So you might call it a navigation go up. You might pop it off the stack or whatever and go from there. So
you're just talking about interfaces then, like you make one interface?
Basically. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple sharing techniques. There's actually a little bit more complicated sharing techniques than just this guy. We have file linking, which is, you know, you're linking a file from a project and it's grabbing that copy and has its little pointer or whatever. And when you do use that, you have to do compilation or conditional compilation. So you're saying, okay, I have this file, and now I'm going to implement that native control, like a map or a progress dialog or something. So you have to do preprocessor compilation conditionals. So you'll say, if it's an iPhone, run this code. If it's an Android, run this code. It's kind of ugly and it gets messy because you're doing all these cross-referencing and all that stuff. And so that's how you'll implement all your platform-specific stuff. So portable class libraries are a newer concept. They've been around for a while, but they haven't really been supported quite as much as they have been now. So a portable class library is similar to a class library, but it's able to hit many platforms. So you'll be able to take this portable class library and say, all right, you can use this for Xbox development. I want to make a new mono game. I'm gonna have all this core logic that I built in one business app. I'm gonna put it in there. Portable class libraries can hit many targets, mainly Silverlight, Xamarin.iOS, Xamarin.Android, Windows Phone, Windows Store, and the Xbox 360. So, and how you implement all those platform-specific features are via abstraction and interfaces, like I said. So you would be able to make a generic method, and then you'll implement it on each platform of how you want it to work. So here's kind of how file linking works. It's kind of a mess sometimes if you don't really know what you're doing with it, but you're basically just taking that file, that shared code file, and you're linking it to each app. And they're going to have their own version of that, and then you'll be able to use the compiler directives to kind of dictate what's going to even run on each platform at compilation time. So I'm not going to go too much in depth with it, but we're going to kind of go over more of portable class libraries, which are the newer version, the newer way of doing all this. So you'll make a portable class library, which is kind of just like a class library. You'll put in whatever you're going to write. You're going to do services, data access, whatever, and you're just going to reference it in your projects. You have one file. It doesn't have to link to multiple projects in the sense that file linking does, where it makes its own copy in a sense. You're just referencing this as if you were making a Silverlight application, and you have like a data file or a data library. You're just linking it that way. So then of course you'll make these abstractions, and then you'll implement them on each platform via dependency injection. So you will have to resolve that with whatever your implementation is of the interface. So that's kind of cool. So I'm gonna do two demos now. One's just the default MVC pattern that Xamarin kind of comes with, and how you would implement just like an Android or an iOS application. And then the second demo is going to be an MVVM approach to it. So let's do that. All right, so the first thing I'll do is we have this project called PhoneWord, and we actually already have it running. Let me get that going here. All right, it's a really basic application. It's just going to take a phone word, 1-800 contacts, and convert it to the respective numbers. So I mean, all we're going to do is translate this guy. He's going to translate to a number. We're going to be able to use the Android intent to make a phone call, and it works on an emulator in a sense, but it'll crash when it tries to actually make the phone call. So it'll go back. Okay. And then we're going to add it to a call history and say, okay, well, we made a call to that guy. So now we have a call history of that number. So kind of just jump into code here. I mean, a lot of you guys are going to be really new to this, but if you've done Android development or iOS development, concepts they'll click pretty quickly. So first, I'll kind of just show. Is this too small for you guys, or do you guys need?
Yeah, it's too dark. Is there anything on the screen?
Let's change that for you guys really quick.
Use the magnifier, man.
Yeah, I will. Let's. All right. So that should be better for light, and let's do a magnifier here. All right, so we're gonna just look at the solution right now. The reason why things might look like they're broken is because I don't have my Mac build host with me, so there can be broken things. But this all compiles, and it's all on GitHub if you guys want to check it out, download a trial license and see how it works. So I just have this core project, and all it does is it's the phone word translator. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that string, and I'm just going to make it into a number. So all it really does is it's just going to check for white space, and if it's null or whatnot, it's going to make a new string, and then we're going to go ahead and return that value, which is just going to be the number. So, and that's all this thing really does. We have a few helper methods, and then we just translate to the number. So other than that, we'll then jump into Droid. So if you guys are familiar with Android, we have activities, we have a layout with an activity, and then we also kind of have resources that we use within this. So I just have a reference here to that core library, which is a portable class library, and we have an activity. So an activity you can just kind of think of as a screen, just whatever has for that screen. You have a question?
Yeah, so to label it as an activity, it looks like we're using annotations.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same for iOS and Windows Phone? Or?
Not necessarily. They all are kind of different. Just this is more of just like you would do this all in your app manifest or your manifest file or whatever. This is just an attribute that kind of links to that. It's just an easier syntax for it, but that would all go in your manifest file, your Android manifest file.
Okay.
So this is just kind of saying, this is what my name is going to be, and this is what icon I'm going to use, and it's also my main activity that gets launched at start. So this is kind of just the MVC approach. We're just going to do everything in this activity, and then we're going to send that list to the next activity to display all the calls. So we're basically just setting it to a view, and this view is just all of my controls that I had on that first initial screen. It's the text box that takes the number, it's the 3 buttons, and that's it. So we'll kind of see how we grab a reference to each button and each edit text to kind of say, now let's use this guy. We'll then kind of do some like disabling, enabling type of stuff based off of if we can even make a call with a number or whatnot. This is a really basic example, so it doesn't have too much validation on it. Then within .NET, we basically use a shorter syntax for just doing button clicks via delegates. So it's basically just like an anonymous method where we're kind of sending all that stuff in. So when we hit that translate button, we have to have something in our edit text, and then we're going to translate that number via our core library, and then we're going to see if we're going to be able, if there is even anything in there. And if there is, then we're going to be able to call it. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to. So to handle the call button history is basically just saying, all right, when we click this button, just send this a list of strings to this next activity, and then we'll generate a list view of all the calls that you made. So that's kind of all this guy does. And then the call button is a little bit more trickier. We actually are going to we're going to make an alert first, just kind of prompt the user if they want to call or whatnot, and then we're going to actually send a intent to call this number. So we use the tell colon to kind of say, all right, this is a number. Same thing as if you click the hyperlink in HTML, and it's going to send you straight to this intent. So, and then we would use that activity to say, all right, well, bring up my phone and let me call this place now. So that's all we're doing with this guy. So that's all that's in the main activity. If we go to the call activity, and a lot of this stuff is going to be really similar on each platform. So you'll notice the same kind of pattern. So we have just an activity to label, and this is a really simple activity. All we're doing is we're grabbing everything that was sent over with that intent, and we're just making a new list view via an array adapter. And all it is an array adapter is basically taking whatever data you have and kind of clicking it in with your list view or your list adapter or whatever. So that's all we had to do for Droid. And we had most of our logic that actually said, all right, is this a number or whatnot? Or sorry, is this going to be translated? So we did all that logic in the actual core library. You can do this with all your business logic and whatnot, but when you actually implement the phone specifics, you have to say, all right, well, I need to know how to do a call on Android. So I need to know that's an intent, and I need to send all this data to the next view, and then we need to display it. So good?
Yeah, so the libraries, so did Xamarin port the Android libraries to C#?
Yeah, in a sense. So you're basically started with the Mono framework. They extended it to MonoTouch and Mono for Android, and they kind of, it's just like an interoperability with going from .NET to Java, .NET to Objective-C, and Stephen Shaw should probably go a little bit more in on that. And if you want more information, you can just talk to me afterwards, and we'll go from there. So.
Sorry, good question. I had two of them. So you have delegates there. I noticed you're using sender and event args. How are those used?
Sure.
Sorry to kick you back.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, so I mean, it's just the syntax of like hooking up a button pretty easily, right? So, I mean, you're just saying, all right, this is an event, like as if you had an event, you make one in .NET. It's going to have a sender and your E arguments or whatever, your event args, right? You can just cast them to like objects and whatever, just via the .NET framework.
So they work. So the sender would be.
Yeah, you can convert that. Yeah.
So that'd be the button, the Android button, sender.
Right. Right.
Also, how does parse labels work? I mean, if you don't have time to go into it, just don't. But like,
for this URI parse.
I mean, like if you're making a parseable object, are you capable of doing that?
Yeah. And you can just talk to me after, and we'll kind of go over that. So we'll kind of go in the iOS stuff now. If you're not familiar with iOS, every iOS kind of has an app delegate. It's where you kind of say, all right, I have a view controller, I have a navigation controller, and let's set the defaults as well. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just kind of showing you that we're registering everything, and good from there. You don't usually edit that file too much, but you still do. So if we go back to so iOS has view controllers, which is basically the same thing as an activity. It's just a screen, and it's going to do whatever you want it to do. So we're going to do the same exact thing with this guy. We're going to have a list of phone numbers. We're going to have those same controls, and we're going to go ahead and do the same methods, but we're going to do it in the iOS version. So I'm going to show a demo of how it looks in iOS first. Let me find the magnifier. So let's go here. Oops. Nope. Let's go back. All right, so this is just kind of a demo of the same exact thing we saw on Android, but we're doing it in iOS now. And all it's doing is that same logic where we're kind of saying, all right, well, we just want to convert this string of characters to a phone number. We just want to make a phone call, and we want to see the history of it after it's done. So, and I think it had a playback error, so I'm just going to play it a little bit forward. So, just kind of the same example. We're going to try to make a phone call. iOS Simulator actually doesn't support phone calls, so you can't actually you can't emulate it, but you'll see the call history. So, so we'll jump back into code here and see how we're doing that. So this is all just like UI. I'm just implementing my UI. I'm making that edit text. I'm making a couple buttons, and I'm registering them to the view. I'm just adding them to that view. So the next thing is with buttons. We're going to do the same exact kind of thing that we did with Android. We're going to say, all right, well, the translate button's going to do this now. Same delegate syntax, object sender, event args, and we're going to use that same shared code where we say, all right, we're going to make this to a number, and we're going to grab it back. So we're using that core library to kind of emulate that concept. So then we'll say, all right, well, are we going to set the title of the call? Are we going to set it to call with the number on it? It just depends on what is returned from that library. Same thing with the call button. Just we're going to try to do the actual call here. So with with iOS, we're actually just trying to just do a URL, and it's just going to convert that to say, all right, if you were to click a hyperlink, you're going to go to that URL and try to hit that phone number or whatever. So that's kind of what we're doing here. I have a helper class here that's basically just saying it's not supported, just so you guys can kind of see that the iOS simulator doesn't support the emulated call. And then finally, just call history button, the same thing that we did. We're just sending that call history over, and we're going to go to the next controller. So, and the next controller, you can probably suspect it's going to be really kind of just small amount of data. Small amount of code. The reason why we have a lot of code in here is because we actually have to have a table source to bind this data to it. So we'll have a data source that we want on this controller. We have that list of strings that we kind of threw in, and then we have just the UI table view. So UI table view is different than just a regular iOS view. It's just, you're just binding data to it somehow. And then you're making a cell and how that cell is going to look and how the actual performance of that cell is, so you can optimize that as well with caching or whatever. So then we're just saying, all right, well, now we have this data source. We give it the controller that it should be in. We have the rows that we want, and we're just kind of returning the count of however many items there are so that we can know how many rows to make. And then we're just making a really simple cell. So this simple cell is just the text field. It's just going to say, all right, well, we have a number, and we're just going to display it. So that's kind of all that is for iOS, and I mean, you can kind of see the similarities between the two. So that's both with the MVC pattern on both platforms. I mean, if you're not too fond of the MVC pattern and you love MVVM, we can do that too. So I'm going to show the next example. So just kind of a slide to show what the MVVM pattern is in general. You kind of just have this data binding between your view and your view model, and then you have model that just kind of you're going to be populating or whatever inside of your view model. So, I mean, all this stuff is portable, and you can just completely use it across each platform. So, so we'll go into the Android version of it, and I'll show it really quick. So it's going to look exactly the same. We're just applying a whole different pattern to this application and trying to emulate the exact same features that we originally had. So I use a framework called MVVM Cross. MVVM Cross is just a pretty well developed framework that is built on top of Xamarin to basically extend view models, and there's a lot of little plugins and stuff like that to kind of go from an MVVM pattern straight to like mobile, to applying it to mobile. You could just use the regular MVVM pattern if you want. It's just this has a little bit more caked in on it. So we're just going to do the same exact thing. I mean, it can translate, you can call, brings you up to the call screen or whatever, and then we'll see it in the call history, right? So, so if we go to the actual core, we're going to see a lot different stuff now. We're going to see a little bit. We're still going to have the phone word translator where we're translating that phone number, but we're sharing almost all the code that we did for validation and all that stuff through the view model. So I'll just kind of go over this just a little bit. So I have a model that I want to share, and I call it call. It's just a phone number, and I'm using SQLite to store this. Next, I have kind of like a repository, which is just a SQLite repository where I'm just saying, all right, make me a new connection, make me a new connection factory, and then let's just store this guy on in there, okay? And then I have a call service. The call service is basically just a layer to say, all right, I just want to use this repository. I want to get back all those calls. I want to add a call to that call history list and go forward with that. And then finally, we have the phone call service. Phone call service is a little bit different because this is an abstraction of each platform. The code actually isn't in here, but we'll see that we have this make phone call method. This make phone call method is based off of basically an iPhone call service abstraction that was implemented on each platform. So I can show you guys all that code later, but I'm just kind of going to go ahead and go forward with this. So we have a call task, which is what MVVM Cross calls a plugin. So if you need to make a phone call, if you need to make access to the file system or whatever, there's already abstractions built that you can just put into your project. So all we're doing with make a phone call is we just want a name and we just want a number, and then we're going to send that same intent that we did with the original MVC pattern, and we're going to push it towards them. So that's all we have for the services portion of it. Then we'll kind of jump into the view models. So if you're familiar with the MVVM pattern, you kind of have these view models, right? So you'll inject what you need on each view model via the constructor, and you'll say, all right, well, I know it's going to make a phone call, and I also know it's going to need data from a call repository or some type of data, whatever you're going to use. I mean, you can inject in other ways, such as property injection and whatever you want to do, but this is kind of how you have to do it with a portable class library. So we'll see that we kind of have all these properties now. We have just like the call button text, we have the phone number, we have the person name, we have some Boolean properties for some visual elements saying, all right, well, can you even call a number? That'll basically say, all right, let's translate it first, and then let's enable this and say true. Well, you can actually view it now. Can see call history if they even have a call history. And then you kind of go into the commands. So commands are basically just like if you were to double click on a Windows form button and you're going to do an action, right? So here we're going to say, all right, we're going to call, and then we're going to add that same translation of that number, and then we're going to actually we're going to just make it viewable on that translate. So when you hit that call button, it says call number. And then we're actually going to make a phone call, and this is where the abstraction comes in. We'll say, all right, well, we already built this dependency that says, all right, well, we need to make a phone call on each platform. So then we can just pass it in and say, all right, well, let's pass the phone number in and let's make a phone call. And then we'll go ahead and add that new call to our call history, and that's all that really does. So, and then the call history command is basically just saying, all right, well, let's just go to the call history screen. So I kind of do a method approach where I make a method for each command. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to show that next view model. So it's the same thing. I'm going from that activity to this activity. Instead, I'm going to view model to view model. And these view models instead go, you can put them on every platform. And that's the cool thing about it. So, so then we'll go into the Droid project and we'll say, go to the views, say the home view. I'm doing nothing in here. That's not where I'm at. That would be where my activity would go. But all that logic is in the view model now. So I can just share that view model across iOS, Android, whatever. However, I still have to implement a interface. So I'll have a home view, and it'll still look like the phone word application that we wrote. We're going to have that edit text, those buttons and whatnot. But the thing that we're doing is we're using data binding. So with MVVM pattern, we use data binding to kind of do some cool stuff. The framework handles a lot of this data binding, but it's not too hard to actually use reflection and kind of data bind your way back into Android or iOS or whatnot. So we use this thing called MVX bind, which is basically just taking, okay, what's the type that we're going to try to bind and what's the actual property in that view model that we're binding to. So you'll kind of notice that edit text, of course, is the phone number. The translate number command is a click action, which is that I command. And then kind of just other stuff like that. We can bind enabled, we can bind visibility. Anything you can do in an MVVM pattern, you can do on this as well. So we also have this call history view, which is just going to be a list view. And we're just going to bind it to a giant item source. So it's just going to be that collection of objects inside of that view model that I had. And I should show this guy. So once we go to that home view model and we're saying, all right, well, let's go to the call history now. Well, all we're saying is, all right, let's grab all the calls. So we're just using a SQLite here to make an instance of the call service. We're resolving it via dependency injection, and then we're just setting all the phone numbers to that method I made in that data service, and then we're going to populate it. So it gets populated, and then we can go forward with that. So then back down in here, I mean, all we're doing is just the item source. We're just binding straight to the item source, and now we're good to go, and it's gonna do exactly the same as I showed you guys. So I'm gonna kind of run into the same thing with iOS here, where we're doing the same exact concepts, and we have these views as well. However, with iOS, you can't do binding on the nib or the zib or whatever, or the storyboard level. You actually have to bind it inside of the view. So you'll kind of see the same stuff where I'm just making the same UI here, but at the bottom here, I'm actually binding them. And this is just a bind method that says, all right, this property to this guy, and this is how it's gonna update via the notify property interface. And now we're binding all this stuff so that it's now just whatever's in that view model. Instead, beforehand, we just kind of passed data around with strings and string arrays and stuff like that. We're just using it all in a view model approach. So with that, we have the same exact functionality, but we're using two different design patterns. So let's kind of look at that exact. I mean, nothing new again, but this is just it's binded, right? You'll be able to make the same calls. I didn't put the error message on this one just because I ported it, and then you'll be able to kind of see just the same exact functionality, but a pattern that a lot of .NET developers like. So those are the two demos, and a lot of the code that we kind of went over. So I'm just gonna kind of end on what you guys can do from this point. So If you're a new .NET or if you're a .NET developer who's kind of looking to get into mobile, I mean, you're going to have to learn Android and you're going to have to learn iOS regardless of if you use these tools. You're going to have to know how stuff works in each respective platform. Because otherwise, you're going to have to be able to say, all right, well, I need to know that I need a map view, or I need to use Google Play Services for a map fragment, or whatever you're going to do. You have to know that before using these tools. So I would say that you guys can start with a trial. There's a free 30-day trial with Xamarin, and there's also a free edition. However, you are limited to using Visual Studio. It's more of like an enterprise type of license that you have to buy. And they also have a thing called Xamarin University, which is kind of teaching you how to become a .NET mobile developer within 4 weeks. And you'll become certified and go through the process and learn everything from basic iOS, basic Android, and you'll be able to convert those skills as well. So just kind of more of questions. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of questions that you guys might have. Go ahead.
How do you target with the Eclipse 880 or 8 gig?
Sure.
You target particular versions now, right?
Yeah, so if you want to target specific versions, you're doing the exact same thing as if you would in Android in the app manifest file. Android manifest file. You'll kind of put where your version of Android that you want to use. So, I mean, you can use 8. You can specifics say, all right, I'm only going to use 18. I'm going to use KitKat or whatever. So, yeah, you can do that, and you can actually everything is kind of ported that way. So this kind of integrates straight into just kind of populating this Android manifest file. But this is where you put like your application name, the package name, any required permissions, and then you have a little bit more advanced settings, which are like build settings and stuff like that. So, yeah.
You choose your target VM as well.
What was that?
You choose your target VM as well
For the view model?
for debugging running.
Oh, sure. So yeah, I use Genymotion, which is an Android emulator. You could use the default emulators that Google provides. They're slow. I mean, they've always been slow. You can use an x86 emulator as well if you wanted to make one of those. I use Genymotion just because it's pretty fast, or I use my phone. So you can just I can just literally plug my phone in and start developing as well. And then you'll pick your targets up here. So just kind of a Visual Studio toolbox that you kind of have. For iOS, you're going to have the exact same thing like this. It's just that I'm not connected to my build server. So if you guys have any questions just on like Xamarin in general, or you're .NET developer trying to get into it, or fire away. So.
Did you say that you could actually use Interface Builder within Xamarin Studio?
Yes. So via you have to have a MacBook, of course, but within Xamarin Studio, they've integrated the Xcode Interface Builder, so you can use that, but you have to do it on a Mac. So all that stuff you can just drag and drop. You can get your nib file or storyboard file or whatever, and then you can just bring it back into here. And they've integrated it in the Xamarin Studio. However, in Visual Studio, the support hasn't come yet, but it's just whatever you want to do for the interfaces. So you can have somebody who makes iOS applications. You can convert that as well if you wanted to. You're using the same file. So.
What is the pricing like for Xamarin Studio?
So the pricing, Xamarin Studio is free. However, there's 4 tiers. You have a free tier, which is there's a limited amount of
16 meg.
It's like 660.
VLLs that you can
Right. So the free edition is limited in how big of an application you can build. I mean, any fun hobby projects you can easily build. However, once you get to like enterprise and business level stuff, you're going to need at least an indie license. So the indie license is $300 per platform, and there's discounts for students. If you're a student and you want to learn Xamarin stuff, it's like $50 for everything. It's pretty much a steal, but so $300 per platform, iOS and Android, and you get access to everything for that. The next is a business license. It's $1,000 per platform, that's going to be able to allow you to use Visual Studio integration. I'm not sure if the pricing will change or whatnot with it, but I mean, there's a lot of people who really want that pricing to be lower. Then you have an enterprise, which is just, you know, you're paying like $2,000 to get support back and forth, emailing and whatnot. So yeah.
So with that student license, you got everything, is that you're able to
Mhm.
actually post your application after,
Right.
still as a student?
Yeah, in any of those platforms, you can actually post your application. It's just, like I said, the free edition, you're limited to a certain size that your application can be.
Okay.
But yeah, so you'll go through the same exact procedures as you would with the Google Play Store and then also the iOS Development Center. You're going to have to provision your application and all that stuff. It's just going to compile all that code to the respective file that you need to push to the store.
And there's
So.
no difference in the binary, the end result?
So there is a small difference. So with the compilers, you can actually you have a debugging mode where you can just push to your phone. You can actually debug with Visual Studio, Xamarin Studio, or whatever, and that's just kind of like a binding of the structures that says, all right, I want to put a breakpoint here, but it doesn't know how to interpret that. So you have to install a mono like helper onto your Android and whatnot. But that's only for debugging. So when you're doing actual production code, you're going to put it in production mode, and you're going to actually you're going to use the right garbage collector and all this stuff to get it ready so it's almost exactly as an iOS application. If you were to compare iOS, if you're going to compare the same application built with Objective-C or Xamarin, you'll probably see no difference. And sometimes it's even faster. It just depends. So. Good.
How's the community and the support? Like, is it hard to get answers or?
Yeah, so the community is awesome. I've been part of the community for about 3 years now. I started in like 2011, just kind of as a student, and I just wanted to learn how to do all this stuff in C#. But yeah, support is pretty good too. If you have a question about anything, just email them. They'll get back to you whenever they can. And there's forums, there's IRC channels, there's Jabber channels. You basically can't get stopped of what you're doing unless there's like a bug in the actual main channel. And usually there's never too many bugs in a stable channel. But if you're a little adventurous, you'll say, all right, I want to use the alpha channel, I want to use the beta channel. You might run into bugs, you can report them and then get, it's just kind of like an open source community in a sense. So yeah. Good. So it depends on what you're trying to target. If you want Visual Studio with that integration, you have to have that business license. But as a student, you'll get everything. I don't know if you're a student or not, but you also will have that trial, that 30-day trial. You can install Visual Studio, and then you can install the toolkit on top of it, and then you'll be able to push to your devices and whatnot. So, but you can download either Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio. Depends on your hardware. If you have a MacBook or you like a Windows. Mm-hmm. Yep. So. Cool. Well, thank you guys, and have a good day.
Swag?
Yep. Go ahead. Take whatever you want.
No more monkeys?
No.
I have some questions.
Sure.
So, if you don't have the business version, I just have the free version, then you can't use .NET Code.
You can't use Visual Studio, but you can use Xamarin Studio. It's a really limited type of thing, but I mean, if you're a student, you're gonna have But if you do have a MacBook where you can do like VMware for Mac, you can do that. Xamarin Studio will get you access to Android only on the Windows platform.
So I could, would I be writing in C Sharp?
Yeah, everything is C Sharp. On each of these guys, it's all C Sharp. It's all .NET.
So I could kind of use Visual Studio on the side or on another computer to
Build
figure out my
services and all
code,
that stuff. Yeah.
copy and put it.
Yeah, you can actually open up any project, alter it in Visual Studio. It doesn't matter what editor you use, right? You just need to compile with whatever editor is actually hooked up to each.
So the one that's not free, we can use, you use Visual Studio Editor at the same time,
Right.
separately.
Yeah, so if you had like GitHub, right? You'll have a repo. You'll say, all right, I want to develop my application. All right, well you like Visual Studio, so you'll have to develop all that stuff in Visual Studio, and then you might have to actually run it on the Xamarin Studio to actually run it to Android or iOS or whatever, because you don't have that license. You don't have that bridge support to iOS or whatnot. So
So if I wanted to connect to a database and stuff, I can use links
Yep.
and everything in the Xamarin Studio.
Yep. You can use anything you do. I mean, the solutions will open the same in Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio. It's just you're going to have to use SQLite instead of like linked to SQL. Because so SQLite is basically a file that stores. It's a relational database as a file. Because phones can't access. I mean, you're going to have to use like a REST service or a SOAP service to talk to a server that has a database on it. You can't just directly connect to a database via mobile stuff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What I want to make requires a bunch of tables for accessing and updating and selecting.
No, you
the
can
data.
do that. SQLite will let you do that. It's
One more step between it.
No, SQLite is just the database on your phone. Any application that you open up on your phone has a SQLite table associated to it, or has like a file associated to it that it stores all that data on. It's just the phone can't connect to an actual database. It has to use a service, so a web service or whatever, to
So
access
we pull
that.
the data down, put it in the SQLite.
Yeah, you can do that. Yep. That's actually a good approach. That's caching and updating your, whatever you're pulling from. You cache it, and then you say, all right, well, this guy updated his name. We're going to throw it back to the server, and then the server updates it in there too.
You can use clouds too.
Yeah, you can use any cloud. You want to use Azure or
So
AWS or whatever.
Okay, somebody updates their name. The server has to be set up to.
The server just needs to spit out JSON, and it needs to take requests as well.
Yeah, you just write a method on your server that you hit from your phone,
Yeah.
or you can push
Can
through
the server be my own computer while I'm
Sure.
developing it?
If you
Yeah.
want to, yeah.
How do I make that a server?
You just have to open up whatever ports you need, send requests.
I just-
kind of go forward with that.
I'd get a hosting account. That's the way I do it.
Yeah, I can give you a Pluralsight card, and you can start learning all that stuff for their month trial. Just kind of stick around, or he can give you one. It's in my backpack, just that large one. So.
How much was the student license?
Students. Okay, when I
If I wanted
started
to
3 years ago,
update somebody's name into a database,
not per month.
the server would
But
have
when
to
you
do
go
that.
to right now,
What kind of tooling or
it's just
software
slightly
do I need on
inflated, and that's
that
for
server
you.
to do that?
For all of them?
Every
Depends on what language
so you'll get
platform
the
you're using.
VS bridge.
Where is it, John?
Plugin. It's in this guy.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
What language? Have you
then
written any
you
server
just
side
write
code
Email for
before?
that, is that?
You'll
No,
just
C#
there's a support at
and then we'd be doing
Xamarin.com.
Android
You
app.
just email them and say, all right, I'm a student. You'll post your schedule or something, some kind of proof that you're,
Yeah.
and then they'll give you a link to buy the product and
Right.
go
The
forward
newer
with that.
stuff that most people use is
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, have a good one.
It's just through apps.net. Web APIs for it. Or you can just use an MVC controller, and that's all you need is controller.
So it'd be sitting there, like let's say 10 people have their apps on and they're all updating their names. It just listens for
I'm
the
looking for
update
side
and
work.
runs
Just
commands.
depends on.
Well,
what it is.
listen, if you're
A lot of
calling
people
from,
just
the
kinda-
thing is, if you're going from your
They don't
phone to
know
the server,
how it works in a sense. They just say,
all you're doing is
This is how we
calling a
want to
method on
implement
the
it, or
server.
we
So
want to
the
make
server
a
just,
library
the server listens.
turns into a jar or
But
something. It's like
it listens for
I can't do that
It listens for
unless I do
people
unless I
going
convert that
browsing
stuff
web
back to
pages.
make
It listens for
Android
people
or
hitting those web methods. So yeah, the server knows.
It's been a great.
But you basically write like something like how he was showing. It's just a method. That's all it is. And you'd send it in JSON. And with .NET, it'll actually take the JSON and you can get it to automatically turn it into an object or whatever. So you don't have to mess with like going through and parsing the JSON.
Yeah.
That's the
A
easiest way
lot
to
of
do it.
people
Do you know anything
offshore
about
a lot of
JSON? Have you ever
stuff
used
like Xamarin stuff.
I would
A lot
probably
of-
learn
there's,
that.
There's a huge community out in
JSON
Europe
is what
and
most
also
people use. There's
India
also
and
SOAP
stuff
and
like that that are
XML.
using
SOAP
these
is dead.
tools
So
because it
don't
saves
worry
them so much work.
about
They're writing
XML is a
code
lot more cumbersome.
across platforms. Or,
JSON it
but,
stands
I mean,
for
of course, it's-
JavaScript
It may
Object
seem like more of
Recognition.
an elitist group because
And the way it looks, like you'll see braces, and then you'll have your
to be
properties, a
honest,
colon,
if you're
and then
an
the
Avid
value.
developer and you can't
But
afford
most
it
of
in
your,
the first place,
like your Android has, there's Android libraries that'll take an object, just an
iOS, you're,
object
you
in
still have
Java,
to pay $100
and
a
turn it
year
into
to
JSON and then send it.
push.
So you don't have to do anything other than just call
debug
one.
Android.
But what you're trying to do is a little more advanced. Because have you done any Android or?
No.
So no Droid,
Yeah, I mean,
no server-side stuff.
I'm sure the price
have a big hill to climb, man.
It might have already seen it change.
I mean, I might just pay somebody to do it, but I gotta see if I
They used to
can
only
do it
have
myself.
an
It's
enterprise account.
it's not
So
hard.
the
It's
enterprise
just gonna
level,
be
now they're
intensive for
kind of
you.
expanding to, you want to try this
What
out and
about
get into
instead of having
just be an indie
centrally
developer,
stored data in
$300
tables with everybody's data on
But you
it,
have to use this.
can I
They partnered with Microsoft just
put the data with that person? Like,
You can.
their name would be on their
So,
phone
we're
instead
gonna see
of
big
on my
changes.
server.
Yeah, and that's just SQLite.
Whether something makes sense for them.
And so when they
If they're
need
gonna
to
have
put
that
in
support,
their name and phone number and whatever, it would be stored on their device instead of my server. Then later on, I can convert it and store it on my server instead.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be a good approach in developing it.
It depends on ultimately what you want to do. I mean, if ultimately you want a central repository of everybody's name and phone number, then I would just start with your database on the server. If it's not a big deal, if you're just trying to store it to echo it back to them,
Mostly they're going to be using the data that they put in.